Fuck! Help! I got stuck in the tumble dryer again!
Hello there, person we've just pulled out of a fridge. Are you okay? Can you tell us your name? Oh, I can tell you my name, Captain. But first, I need to know, do you know anything about my time? No, of course not. And that doesn't seem dodgy at all as a question before you'll tell us who you are. No, of course it doesn't. I'm Khan. I have no idea who that is. Good. Let's keep it that way. Also, I'm going to nick your ship now. Bye! Hello and welcome to another episode of TrekHammer, where we're talking about every single episode of Star Trek from the beginning right through to the modern episodes. Today, we're talking about the infamous Space Seed and the arrival of Khan. So what we've got here is nothing less than the arrival of Kirk's nemesis, Khan. The super smart, super strong guy who took over part of a planet back in the 20th century to the early 21st century during the Third World War, the eugenics wars. Apparently they're the same thing. Later Star Trek kind of uses those terms as if they're two separate conflicts, but here they're one thing. They're the Third World War. And it's very interesting, because apparently this all went down in the 90s, or at least the late 80s, early 90s, because Khan apparently took the ship and flew off into the sunset in the 90s, which... Now, I know that some YouTubers, like John DeMarco, suggest that the timeline hasn't been changed, because when we see Voyager's episode Future's End, we see Khan's Botany Bay ship on the desk of the guy that's building his Brave New World. Except when I was looking for the footage for that from episodes of Voyager, I didn't see the Botany Bay on Sterling's desk. It's not even on Rain Robinson's desk. It's actually on her windowsill when she phones him, and it's got the booster rockets. What's on her desk is a Talosian, which is another Star Trek reference, and a bit of a weird one in this respect. So, I'm sorry, it must have changed. Something's changed somewhere, because we see in Strange New Worlds and Star Trek Picard that the Khan project is essentially being put back. We see guys building toward the eugenic system that produces Khan. We see a young Khan. Is it the same Khan? We don't know. That is a fair point. We don't know if it's the same Khan. Could have been a second one, could have been a first one. But it doesn't really fit with what we've been told in this episode. So at some point something has changed. Enterprise has the temporal Cold War. That could be the explanation. I'm perfectly fine with that. But I think we all have to agree that the timelines don't quite add up anymore. But anyway, let's take it from what we have right now in this particular timeline. We've got a ship that's way out in the middle of nowhere, and everyone on the Enterprise is very surprised to see it there. They find it's the Botany Bay, which Kirk immediately goes, that was a penal colony in Australia. Is this a penal ship? Spock says, well, there's no actual logical reason to expect that, despite the name, which is fair enough. It's quite a possibility that it's not. They might have just named it after a location. Happens to be a penal colony, but they've named it after a location. So they go on board and investigate, and they find a load of suspended animation capsules. And there's 84 people in them. No, 85, because there's 84 people plus Khan. So 85 capsules. They've brought along Lieutenant MacGyver's, and she's the historian on the ship. And I love that Kirk says, bring along that historian, they'll finally get to do something. Which suggests that this historian has not been required for missions for quite some time, which we later find out. She's bored, she's painting during the office hours, so yeah, she's not having to do much. But I was watching this with my wife, and she was asking me, if they're not used much, why is there a historian on board? And of course, my answer, I don't know if this is legitimate, but my answer is, this is an exploration ship. They're going out to chart new worlds. Obviously, they're going to have botanists, psychiatrists, psychologists. They're going to have historians. They're going to have ethnoarchaeologists and things like that, because they need to know what all the stuff that they find on these journeys is all about. So you could have a historian and an archaeologist beam down and say, right, well, based on our knowledge of other civilizations, we can say that this is suggestive of potentially this, that kind of thing, And then they can chart what they find and get some ideas, and then the Federation can assess the logs and see whether they want to go out and look at it. That's my view. That's my view of why they've got a historian on board who's bored, because they haven't needed a historian for a while, basically. So, anyway, it's time for her to do something. She is really into the big strong man. There was this thing in history that thankfully is going out of fashion now. The great man fallacy of history. Like, history is produced by these great men who do great deeds. Well, we know now that that's not true. It's all about systems and situations and people's responses to them and all of that. There are some people that absolutely change society and change the world, like Napoleon, Caesar, Alexander the Great, things like that. They're basically the genesis of the great man history idea, but it's not real anymore. We don't think it was real ever. But this MacGyver's, she really likes these great men, so when she sees Khan, she's very interested. She doesn't know who he is, but she knows he's from a time when these big, powerful, what unfortunately Twitter people might call an alpha male, were around. So she's very interested and very taken with him very quickly. So, anyway, something happens, and Khan is about to die. He's still in the stasis pod. He's about to die. He's dying because the life support's broken on that one. And they get him out. And at that point, I turned to my wife and said, this is a great example of the for want of a nail idea in narratives and history. If the Enterprise hadn't got there just in time and that life support system had failed, Khan would have died there. He would never have endangered the Reliant. He would never have corrupted MacGyver's. He would never have shot the Genesis torpedo and caused the Genesis planet. He would never have killed Spock. So all of these things disappear. Spock lives. MacGyver's doesn't leave Starfleet. Spoiler for later in this episode. And all of these other things. The Genesis project wouldn't have happened. So, well, the Genesis project would have happened, but the Genesis planet wouldn't. So a diplomatic incident would have been just put aside. It's very interesting, isn't it? If Khan hadn't survived this particular incident, where his brains and his might would not have got him out of it, then Spock would have lived and the Federation wouldn't have had a diplomatic incident. Very interesting. So anyway, they rescue him, because of course they do. And he seems moderately grateful. They'll beam him back to the ship, and Khan plays along with him for a little bit, and then starts asking questions like, what do you know of my time? Who are you? Where are we? And refuses to answer who he is until he's established to his content that he's safe enough to reveal who he is. Kirk and them don't know Khan. Apparently, he's on a list somewhere, buried deep in history archives, of the supermen who escaped the eugenics wars. Most of them were killed or rounded up and arrested and all of that, but Khan and between 80 and 90 others disappeared. There are 85 life pods on this ship. Aha! Now things are coming together. Now we know why they're on that ship. They've escaped Earth. And this builds up, and then Kirk realizes, right, we've potentially got a bad guy on our hands. Quite a significant bad guy. Meanwhile, Khan is acting like an absolute aggressive, abusive boyfriend and predator toward MacGyver's. He's getting her under his control. He's adjusting her hair and playing to her ego in certain respects and getting her to like him. And then, when she starts questioning what he's talking about, he says, get out. And she apologizes. And then he says, no. Now, I'm annoyed with you. You have to ask permission to stay. This is abusive behavior. It's coercive behavior, and it's what predators do. Anyone that's been in that kind of situation would recognize that immediately. Anyone who knows anyone who's been in that situation would recognize that immediately. It's one of those things. It's just what predators do. Khan is a predator, and it's coming across from the point of view of it's audibly coming across, and it's coming through in what he says and what he does, but his mannerisms are still very affable. So it's actually it sets off that thing in the back of your mind that goes, this guy's not right. This guy is certainly not right. He's dangerous, and she's in trouble. But of course the rest of the crew don't know, and she doesn't know either, but she's being corrupted and coerced by him and starting to become on his side. Which is important because she helps him take over the ship, which is not great. Khan gets his people out of stasis, and together they hatch a plan. They're going to take the ship, and MacGyver's going to help them, whether she originally wants to or not, and then she does. And they do take the ship. They take it very, very quickly. These guys are a definite threat. So now we've got Kirk, Spock, Scotty, McCoy, and all of them rounded up, and Kirk is put into a pressure chamber in one of the science labs, or engineering, I can't remember which. And it's a case of, right, you turn control of this ship over to me, or your captain dies. And no one will do it. So one of them threatens to smack Uhura around unless she uses the controls to bring the visuals up and show them Kirk is dying. And then one of them raises the hand to attack Uhura when she refuses to do any more than that. So MacGyver steps in. And at this point you think, is she going to turn on these people and actually redeem herself? No, she's just going to get them to not attack Uhura. And then she continues with the coup, essentially. The mutiny, whatever you want to call it. But of course, Kirk and McCoy and Spock, they're all very much into sorting this out. Spock manages to save Kirk, which is very nice, and is actually the opposite of the situation we have in The Wrath of Khan. Kirk is behind the glass, Spock is outside. You know the thing, willing to die for one another. I don't know whether that's intentional. Probably is, from a visual standpoint, to do that in the sequel. It's a very good episode, but it's interesting that Khan is outthought again. So we've got this Superman who's really smart and really strong, and once again the Enterprise crew outthink him because, yeah, he was great for his time, but he's not in his time anymore. It's very much the idea of the great man theory, and would Napoleon be able to be just as good put into the future? Would Alexander the Great have been just as good against the Romans? That kind of thing. It's the what-if situation. He's the man out of time. Is he able to use all of his abilities? Actually, no, he's not. He can be outthought because he's not familiar with the situation as it is. The man needed to be in the time. I think that's really good writing. Kirk, Spock, all of them, they managed to outthink and outact the guy, not because he's stupid, but because he's not yet got all of his bearings. I like that. So is this a good episode? Yeah, I think it's a pretty good episode. It keeps you going and it keeps you interested all the way through. It's not the greatest episode, and it's actually quite a slow-paced one for the introduction of the guy who became Kirk's nemesis, but I still like it. I'm going to give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. So, whoop factor 8.5, Mr. Sulu. Let's go. What did you guys think about this episode? Did you like it? Did you think there was something missing? Do you think that I've missed something that was important to you? Do let me know in the comment section down below, because I always like having a chat about Star Trek with you guys. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk Robinson. You've been watching TrekHammer. Remember to click that like button and subscribe for future videos. But until then, live long and prosper. If you like the show, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help create future videos. That's patreon.com/Zoe Kirk Robinson. And I've got an extra special thanks going out to Chief89, Sam Yates, Retro Mickey 82, Mo Henry, and George Bortorini. Thank you so much, guys.